President Cyril Ramaphosa will meet with the Eskom Board and Management tomorrow, where he will be briefed on plans to mitigate and resolve the current electricity crisis. The president, who has cut short a working visit to Egypt, will also visit the operations centre in Megawatt Park. For the latest on load shedding and what to expect, we're joined now in the studio by SABC reporter Liabo Setho. Liabo, let's first start with what took place at Megawatt Park today. There quite a flurry of activity to explain the latest situation.
So obviously we know that the country is currently languishing in stage 4 of load shedding. This is after yesterday that we went into stage 6, an unprecedented stage where we had never seen that stage before, which means that the power utility had to shed about 6,000 megawatts off the grid. They say that the load shedding is important, so that the country doesn't go into complete darkness. But we have since recovered and gone back to stage 4. So I can safely say that stage 4 has become the new normal. I went to Eskom today to speak to the Eskom COO, Mr. Jan Oberholzer, who showed me around their IGCC. This is their generation. We'll see on the system there that shows the megawatts and that shows the power stations and how they are doing. It also shows particularly your Medupi power stations, that the old one that had been flooded by water since the incessant rains has started, showing that, you know, there's a couple of units that were still building up capacity and others were completely empty. At the time that I went there, everything looks like it was still ramping up, albeit at a slower pace, because you'll remember we are only used to your stage 1, stage 2 of load shedding, so we're still at a precarious situation at the moment.
It's interesting that you speak about a new normal, Liabo. We know the Eskom spokesperson seeming to paint the new normal for us as the next 2 years, because they're saying they're trying to stabilize the system, and for the maintenance plan to be effective, it means for the next 2 years we will be experiencing power cuts. But of course, what's interesting is Mr. Oberholzer himself, in conversation with me last night, was unable to confirm that we can never truly say we won't reach stage 8.
Actually, you're quite right. You know, he tried to allay the fears today that, you know, we probably will not see stage 8 today because, you know, the rains are reducing, the number of rains is coming down. Yes, it's subsiding. But he did paint a bleak picture in terms of the power stations and their maintenance status. You remember that these power stations have not been maintained for a very long time, and it is an aging fleet of around 37 years on average. And he made an example actually when he spoke to me earlier on about a body of a 37-year-old. That is a body that is, you know, getting old. It needs to be maintained. You know, you need to start taking your multivitamins. You need to service yourself essentially.
But what's very surprising, Liabo, is that this is the reasoning that we keep getting from Eskom all the time, saying that we haven't been maintaining our plants very well. So then others would argue this should have been long foreseen, that we'd actually reach stage 8. And also when you talk about how the coal processing or how the coal handling has led to a reduction of capacity, we've been wanting for many, you know, rains, and now that we have them, surely one would have assumed that the stockpile would not have been left in a position where it actually is unusable.
You know what, I asked him this earlier this morning, and unfortunately he could not give me a straight answer about why we don't have a shed or a carport, if you like, where you're keeping the coal dry. In fact, all he said was that there was flooding at particular stations and there was nothing they could do at that time because the power station had been flooded, and they're hoping that when it starts to dry out, you know, things will become better. But, you know, going back to the issue of the utility itself, I think it paints a dire picture of just how bad things are, their financial status. So things like maintenance perhaps have taken a back seat. And we don't know also to what extent the issue of corruption and looting at the power utility has contributed to power stations not being serviced. We know that there's issue of Medupi and Kusile, who have overrun over the years by billions of rand from what they initially needed to cost. And so we won't perhaps now quantify the damage. But as you say, 2 years from now, I still see and agree with you that we will still be experiencing the same power issue that we see countries like Nigeria and others constantly seeing of, living on generators, as it were.
And this is a new reality many South Africans are contending with. Thank you very much, SABC reporter Liabo Setho.